period, we have to underline few things. One thing would be, the Catholic Church never had jurisdiction over the Jews who didn't convert. Okay? If you were Jewish, Catholic Church could not touch you. Why? Because you were not a Christian. And Catholic Church can check what Christians believe and what Christians do and what they disbelieve. But Catholic Church it doesn't have dealings with heretics outside of Christianity. Okay? With non-truths outside of Christianity. But on the other side, there is a problem. Unlike Judaism, in which a convert usually needs to be an adult in order to be fully accepted into the community, and consequently, as I said previously, he cannot leave. I mean, he can leave practically, but theoretically, he is still inside. But the problem with Christianity is that baptism is not a willing act. How do we know that? It's not necessarily a willing act, because you baptize babies. Now, did that baby in that particular moment become a Christian? It did. Did anybody ask you, dear baby, how do you feel about being a Christian? No. Can this baby later in the life say, well, nobody asked me? No. I mean, today you can do anything, but I'm speaking about then. Well, the same way, if you are Jewish and somebody baptized you by force, as far as the Christian law is concerned, you are baptized and you are a Christian. So what happened is that in 1391 there was a mass pogrom against the Jews. Dozens and hundreds were killed. Tens of thousands were forcefully baptized. But interestingly enough, this was not the deed of the king. And this was not a deed of the aristocracy. And even more interestingly, it wasn't a deed of the church. It wasn't the church who did this. These were, I mean, when I say it wasn't the church, this didn't come from Pope, from Rome, as a directive to cardinals and archbishops and bishops all over the Spain. No, the church was not into that. So who did this? There were few, how do you call them in English? Mandatory, monks. How do you call them? Yeah. So, uneducated, not belonging to high echelons of the church, not even priests. You know, there is a difference between a monk and a priest. And a bunch of those inspired the mob all over the Spain to enter the Juderias, to enter the Jewish quarters, and to forcefully convert the Jews. Now, why would the masses do so? Well, there is plenty of reasons. Imagine some of the Jews of Spain, I can't say many, but enough, were dealing with banking business, right? Or banking services. Yeah. So let's say that you are a Christian. Let's say that you owe the Jew some money. Well, it's better for you if he gets accidentally killed, because then all the debts are automatically annulled. There were no lawyers, there were no, how to call them, notaries, nothing was really sealed and so on. So when a moneylender is killed, his family doesn't get the most of the debts that people, you know, took upon themselves from their father or grandfather or whatever. That's one of the reasons. Another reason is obviously religious zeal. Third reason is obviously inborn human, how would you call it, tendency towards violence when it is not punished. So there is plenty of different reasons. In any case, approximately, we don't know the numbers, but approximately, it's the estimation of the researchers that 1/3 of the Jewry of Christian Spain, and at that particular moment, Christian Spain means 90% of Spain. So 1/3 of huge territory, almost entire Spain today, besides the Kingdom of Granada, in all those realms, 1/3 of the Jews were converted. Now, many a time, what happened was that in one single family, 2 brothers were converted and 2 brothers not. Why? Because those misfortunate 2, they lived at the beginning of the Jewish quarter. So when the mob entered, right, they were captured by the mob, brought to the church and baptized. And then 2 others, one was at the end of the Jewish quarter, so when the king's army entered to make peace, they were, they were not reached by the mob before that. Okay? Or they simply were not in the city. Or they went into a salary, they went to the, upper, whatever. So this is something that will bring huge problems, obviously for the Jewish community, but also for the church. Because the church never wanted those 200,000 Jews if they were not sincere believers. The Jews wanted all 600,000 of them if they were to really believe in Jesus Christ. But church never wanted 200,000 urban, literate, educated heretics inside. Because it was so easy to manipulate rural Christian population. People were illiterate. Now Jews, by definition, the male knew how to read. And many of them also how to write. And they were exposed, first of all, no Jews lived, there is no such a thing as Spanish shtetl. All of them lived in cities. All of them were urban. All of them were highly urban. Or urban, or whatever is the English word. So, this became a huge problem for the church. Because those people, the research today divides them into 4 different categories. 4 different categories of 200,000 unwilling converts. One category is the people who said, we never wanted this, we will have to keep it on the outside, on the surface, but below we'll stay Jewish and we'll keep Jewish law. That's the extreme on this side. Then there was extreme on another side who said, well, if God could allow for this thing to happen, either he doesn't exist, or he doesn't care, or he's really Christian. In any case, I'll just flow with this. Okay? So that's extreme on another side. And then in the middle, there were people who said, well, I didn't want this, but now let's convert, this is a very Jewish approach, let's convert defect into effect, right? So, I didn't want to be converted, but now, once I am converted, let's see what there is in it for me. Okay? And then there was another group who was saying, well, we will keep Christianity for this world, and we will keep Judaism for the worlds to come, and we'll have it both ways. Okay? Now, the church, all of a sudden, needs to establish Inquisition. If there was no massive conversion, forceful, unbelief of tens of thousands of Jews, there would be no need for Inquisition. Spain was quite a Catholic country. Next year, 1392, they established Inquisitions in Spain. Soon enough, they see that those in the last category, and those in the category, let's keep Christianity for this world and Judaism for the world to come, and even the people from the third category, let's see what there is in it for me, they were actually making it very good in the Spanish society. Why? Because they had a better starting point. They were more intellectual, than the Christians. So they could easily grasp the size, the matter of the day, and they were increasingly becoming leaders in all the fields, whether it's economy, or it is politics, or it's theology. So the Spanish state, the Christian Spain, passes for the first time in Spanish history, leyes de pureza de sangre, the laws of the purity of blood. In other words, even if you were a sincere convert, but you are coming from Jewish background, right? You cannot obtain certain positions in the society. In other words, you cannot teach at the university, you cannot get to the higher echelons of the church, you cannot be a public servant from a certain level up. Have you ever asked yourself, why do the people in Spain until this very day have 2 second names? And when a lady gets married to her husband, she doesn't take over his name. Well, just like many other things, it has to do with us. How come? When applying for a job, a Christian would like to underline that he belongs to old Christian stock. So he would sign with his father's second name and his mother's second name. And sometimes, if the position was really high, people would really want to prove that they were Christians, so they would be signing with all the names, right, few generations back. So they would say Felipe González Martinez Quintana Rodriguez, right? And this would prove that neither of his 4 grandfathers and grandmothers was Jewish, right? So what do you do today in Spain? Every single person has 2 second names. They are both paternal. He takes the first paternal second name of his paternal father, and that's his, of his paternal grandfather, and that's the first second name in the row. And then he takes the first second name of his maternal grandfather, and these are his 2 second names. So if you have a person who is called González Martinez, right? His son will take from his father only the González thing, right? Martinez will fall away. But then this kid will also have a mother. The mother would have 2 second names. Okay? Let's say Quintana Rodriguez. So Rodriguez will fall down. Quintana would stay. So now we would have a kid who would be called González Quintana. Why? Because his father was González Martinez and his mother was Quintana Rodriguez. You follow? Okay. So this happened only here. Because only here, yes?
I am from Colombia and they also ask for both last names.
Of course, because the society and the culture were established by people from here. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that in all Latin countries it was like that, right? But at the beginning, when the Spanish ruled, it was like that. Then some countries later abolished it, others didn't. But it always comes with Spanish. It happens only in Spanish colonies. It doesn't happen in others. Now the Inquisition was basically established in order to check whether these newly converted Jews are functioning as good, believing Christians. There is a beautiful joke. It's probably one of the oldest Sephardic jokes. And it says like this. It's a Holy Friday. What's Holy Friday? Good Friday. What's Good Friday? Exactly. So before that you have a penitence period in Catholic Church, and there are different dietary laws. But then during the Semana Santa they become even more strict. And then on Good Friday they become extremely strict. So on Good Friday you basically eat bacalar and bread and you drink water, and that's the end of the story. And then the joke says like this. A priest is going through ex-Jewish quarter where new Christians live, and he sees smoke coming out of a chimney. And he smells, and it's lamb. So he knocks on the door, the Jew opens, and the priest says, "You are eating lamb on Good Friday?" And the Jew says, "Of course not. This is fish." So the priest says, "Fish? This doesn't look like a fish. It looks like a lamb to me." So the Jew says, "Well, was I Jewish?" He says, "Yes." "And then did you baptize me?" He says, "Yes." He says, "Okay, I baptized the lamb." Okay, so it's probably one of the oldest Sephardic Jews still living. And it's basically a community defending itself by saying, you can do to us whatever you want from the outside, but on the inside we will stay whatever we are and want to be. So, the Inquisition didn't deal with the matters of this world. It dealt with saving your soul. In order to save your soul, it needed to extract truth from you. Now, as a heretic, as a good heretic, you were trying to hide what you really believe. So the Church Inquisition would use all kind of, how do you call them? Tortures, in order to get truth from you. Now, they would also work on denunciations. Okay? But let alone denunciations, they would also work, only the tax services today work like, like the Catholic Inquisition in the Middle Ages. I mean, if you go under the criminal law, right? And you want to sue somebody anonymously, it doesn't work, right? And if you go to civil court and you want to sue somebody anonymously, it doesn't work. But if you go to tax authority and you don't sue, but you denounce somebody anonymously, they tell you, "Thank you, away to go, good citizen." So this is the way the Catholic Inquisition functioned. Now, I could have billion reasons to denounce you or you. I might like your wife. I might like your daughter, which you wouldn't give me. I might owe you some money. So the easiest way for me to get rid of an unwilling father-in-law, right? Or of an annoying father-in-law, or of somebody that I owe money to, would be to denounce him to the Inquisition. Now, Inquisition believed that Jews were extremely social beings. So, when catching one, they would also always torture him until he would give other names. And people then were giving names just for the tortures to stop. Right? And then they would catch those 5 people who were implicated by your testimony, they would torture them. Then those people would give additional 5 names. 5 multiplied with 5, it's 25. So those 25 people would be tortured, and they would give additional 25 multiplied with 5. I'm in humanities, I'm not in mathematics, so it's a number. So you see how it functioned. Now, Jews were terrified of all of this, and they were usually removing themselves from their previous social context. So if they lived in the north, they would move to the center. If they lived in the center, they would move to the north, just in order to play old Christians. Then they would falsify, or they would pay for falsified documents which would establish their Christian lie. So many Jews went to the Inquisition, believing that that's the only place where they will not be looked for. So you had Jews working in the Inquisition. It's crazy. It's one of the craziest periods in Jewish history. Now, how many of you are from New York? Well, in New York there is, in the Upper West Side, I don't remember whether it's 70, 74, something like that, you have S&P Synagogue. What's S&P? Spanish and Portuguese. Now, this is another thing in Jewish geography. When you say Spanish and Portuguese, does this mean these people are from Spain or Portugal? Of course not. Where they are from? Spanish and Portuguese, just like their name implies, are either from London or from Amsterdam. Right? That's Jewish geography. The same way somebody says, I'm Syrian, and you say, oh, you must be from Brooklyn. Right? Because, you know, it's a huge city in Syria. So, what happens is that this inspired, and this is something, if for nothing else, only for next 5 sentences would be worth it for me to come and speak with you today. That's something that I would like you to take with you to think and reflect. If there is a message of today's presentation, that's this. We never really studied the correlation between forceful conversions of the Jews and invention of secularism. Again, we never studied enough the connection between forceful conversions of the Jews and secularism. This is a field that needs at least 10 to 20 PhDs to be written in the next 10 years in order for us to estimate the Jewish contribution to the development of the concept of secular state. You have to understand, most of the Catholics in Spain were not bothered by the fact that the state was Catholic. They were Catholic. The state was Catholic. It was good. The same way most of the Jews are not bothered with the country, with the fact that Israel is a Jewish country in which the weddings are conducted by Orthodox Rabbanut. And then conservative Jews in America might be pissed off by that, and then Reformed Jews in America might be pissed off by that. But overwhelming majority of Israeli society couldn't care less about how people abroad feel, right? They don't have any problem. Why? Because they are all eligible to Orthodox wedding, right? So they are not bothered with that. This is not a problem for them. This is a problem for people who don't have Orthodox Jewish halakhical status. Okay? People who are patrilineal Jews, people who are Jews through conservative or reform conversions, right? But for the rest of the Israeli population, this is not a problem. So they are not bothered by it. You see? The same way, 600 years ago, Spanish Catholics were not bothered by the fact that the state was Catholic. Now imagine this. In 1492, I'll get to secularism later, but in 1492, Spain is actually kicking out the Arabs from the last Arab enclave in Granada, finishing the occupation or military Muslim presence on the Iberian soil. Right before that, 2 kingdoms united, when Isabella de Castilla and Fernando de Aragon, the king of Aragon, Fernando, and the queen of Castilla, Isabel, got married. Before, these were 2 countries, but now it's 1 country. And they were also planning on getting their child married to the child of the King of Portugal in order to unite politically the entire peninsula. Why would the Queen and the King, especially the King who was Jewish, did you know that that king, halakhically, speaking of Orthodox halakha, he was Jewish. His great-grandmother was Jewish. She was called Palomba. And Jews actually brought the matrimony. Abraham Senor. Senor is his second name. Abraham Senor and other Jewish diplomats, when picking, this is a diplomatic issue. A princess whom the prince is going to marry, or whom the principal is going to marry, it was never a matter of aesthetics. It was never a matter of love, right? It was always a diplomatic issue. So the Jews in the court of Castilla helped pick Fernando, the king of Aragon, because they believed that he will be better to the Jews in Castilla also. If we bring the Jewish king upon us ourselves, he will do better with us than a totally Goyish king. Follow? So, there was a saying from these times. The Jews were saying, Palom etzem mi atzmotenu, basar mi bsarenu, palombino yimloch alenu. How do you call it? Bone of our bones and flesh of our flesh, Palombino, the grandson of Palomba, great grandson of Palomba, will rule over us. Now, one has to ask the question, why under the sun would ethnically Jewish or halakhically Jewish king and his royal bride want to get rid of the Jews? Jews didn't have any military presence in Spain. They didn't have any political aspirations to overthrow the reigning religion or the dynasty. So why would anybody want to kick them? Because they became internal problem of Spanish society. All the way the Jews lived here, the Conversos would never really assimilate. That's at least what the king thought. That's at least what the queen thought. Why? Let's say that 100 years before, there were 4 brothers, right? 2 of them were forcefully converted, 2 of them were not. So, you are now grandson of one of those 2 converted brothers. And you have your third cousin, who is grandson of unconverted brothers. And you turn to him and you say, I need tefillin for my son. Obviously he's going to bring you tefillin. And you say, I need mezuzot for our house. You'll bring him. And I need matzot for Pesach. You'll bring him. Right? So the Spanish, this time, anti-Semitism came from the higher echelons of the society, of the church and of the state. They said, we will never assimilate those who were converted if we don't kick those who were not. And then this only made the problem even bigger. Because in 1492, Jews were given 2 options, either to convert or to stay. Additional 200,000 converted. Now Spain had to deal with 400,000 Jews who never wanted to be Christians. For years to come, these people will be leaving Spain and rejoining the Jewish fold in 16th, 17th, 18th century, and then even today. Even today. And we will speak about that. So, now these people, in 1492, people who had strong Jewish identity, strong Jewish education, strong Jewish background, and left. They left mostly for the Ottoman Empire. Some left for the North Africa. Others left for Portugal. Others left for Italy, and even for the papal lands in Italy. But overwhelming majority went to Islamic realm, to the Ottoman Empire or to the North Africa. The overwhelming majority. But the Jews who were uncomfortable with their Converso status in Spain, and who were afraid of Inquisition in 17th century, they didn't really feel comfortable going to Islamic realm. Why? Because these people were trained as Christians, and they dressed as Christians, and they spoke as Christians. They only had this knowledge that they were Jewish. So, they couldn't be openly Jewish in Catholic Spain. They couldn't be openly Jewish in any Catholic land. And they wouldn't go to Islamic land. Fortunately, though, there was a Protestant Holland. According to Protestant understanding, to the Protestant understanding of Christian law, Catholic Church is not Christianity. Consequently, if you were baptized into a Catholic Church, you were never baptized. Consequently, if you are a converso from Spain and you move to Holland, you can reverse to your Judaism. You are even preferable in the eyes of the Protestant Church than a Catholic papal heretic. For the Protestant Church of Holland, the biggest heretics in the world are those who follow the Pope. Now, you want to be saved from the Pope and to return to Judaism. Welcome! Ahlan wa sahlan. So, these Conversos, they went to Amsterdam, they established their community, and these people are really something special. Have you ever been, if you have never been, to either to Mark Spencer Synagogue, what I'm saying, Babies, Mark Babies Synagogue in the city of London, or to the Spanish and Portuguese Synagogue in New York. You've been there?
Yes. Yes.
It's beautiful, it's totally different than anything you know. It's a beautiful combination of museum, a Masonic lodge, traditional Sephardic synagogue, and Rotary Club. Right? It's all together, and it's beautiful. It's really beautiful. In any case, now think of this. I want to share with you information about a rabbi from Spain called Rabbi Salomon ibn Verga, or in Hebrew, Shalom ibn Verga. He wrote a book called Shevet Yehuda, the Scepter of Judas. And he was basically trying to understand deeper meaning of anti-Semitism. However, though, interestingly enough, for the first time in Jewish history, in the history of Rabbinic Judaism, not for the first time in Jewish history, but for the first time in the history of Rabbinic Judaism, this wasn't an autistic rabbinical work. What I mean when I say autistic rabbinical work, it's very easy. The way the rabbis write. If we were to keep Shabbat more, right, the Gentiles would treat us better. So Gentiles are not a function. It's all question of our relation with Torah. Right, if the Jewish people don't keep the mitzvot, God brings upon them a king who is worse than Haman. If they make teshuvah, the king falls. If they don't, the king deals with them until they do. That's the traditional Judaism. Now this guy called Ibn Verga, he tried to understand anti-Semitism as social phenomena really. Right? Including the Jewish contribution to anti-Semitism. Interesting. We are speaking about the end of 15th century, beginning of 16th century. You have a rabbi who says, I want to understand what the heck we do in order for them to hate us. It's not, we are not only passive in this. Right? So, he's also cynical. So he says, the fact that we killed Jesus didn't really help. When he brings the possible reasons for anti-Semitism, he says this and that and this and that, and then in the middle of it he says, and the fact that we killed Jesus didn't really help. So, I really suggest to you to read the work. It's a beautiful book. Now he is trying to build a momentum for his idea. So according to him, anti-Semitism is typical for weak and not for strong, for poor and not for rich, for uneducated and not for educated. In order to convey this message, he always has few people on the stage. If the priest is anti-Semite, then the cardinal is Philo-Semite. But if the cardinal is anti-Semite, then the king is Philo-Semite. So in one of the scenes, and the book is written in Hebrew, I suppose it's translated to English, please check. So in one of those, a master of theology called Nicholas comes to King Pedro, Christian Spain, and he tells him, those Jews, only the middle Shalom, they give us in truth. Now what does that mean? When a Jew sees a Gentile from 100 meters, he says, may you rot in hell. Then when the Gentile comes near, he says, Shalom, how are you doing? And then, when the Gentile passes by, the Jew says, may you be taken to Red Sea with Paro and his lot. So the king says, how do you know this? And Master Nicholas says, well, one of them who converted and became one of us told me. So the king says, well, that guy likes changes, doesn't he? If he didn't, he wouldn't change his religion. But if he changed his religion, maybe he's changing the facts also. So Master Nicholas says, well, invite one of them and you will see these people are refugees amongst us, and they are so haughty, and they have the best houses, and they have the best clothes, and they have the best servants, because they are so showing off. So the king invites Rabbi Yehuda ibn Shanji, and he says, tell me, now I want you to listen carefully. Tell me which religion is better, Judaism or Christianity? That's what the king is asking from the rabbi. Now the rabbi says, I need 3 days to answer. He goes home. After 3 days, he comes with a Tisha B'Av face, and the king says, what's going on with you? And the rabbi says, oh, don't even ask me. We had this jubilee in our community, and before he left, he has 2 sons. To one of them he gave a precious rupee, and to the other he gave the precious sapphire. And then he left, and then a year passed, and we don't know what happened of him. And his sons came to me, and they told me, maybe we should sell the stones and split the money. And I told them, why should you do that? Your father knew exactly who each of you is. He gave one the ruby and the other the sapphire. So the ruby guy should stick to his ruby, and the sapphire guy should stick to his sapphire. And the king says, well, that's exactly what I would tell them. And the rabbi says, well, why aren't your ears listening to what your mouth is saying? God in heaven had 2 sons, Yaakov and Esau. To one he gave the Old Testament, to another he gave the New. Now you ask me which of the testaments is better? Ask him. He gave them. Yeah. So the rabbi proceeds and he says, for me, as a Jew, Judaism is better. Because I was a slave in Egypt, and God intervened in human history and brought me out. For you, Christianity is better because obviously you are satisfying God enough by keeping the precepts of this religion in order for Him to give you this great kingdom. The king says, I wasn't asking you subjectively. I was asking, and we are speaking of 1502 when the book was published. He says, I didn't ask you subjectively. I asked you objectively. And the rabbi says, well, ask God. I never gave both those 2 books. And then the king thinks for a moment and he says the following. It's interesting. The king says, I'm translating to English. He says, I understand that you don't understand the truth the way we understand the truth. Because if you understood the truth the way we understand the truth, you would do the truth the way we do the truth. So it's a play of words, right? But when not doing the truth the way we understand the truth, you are certainly trying to understand the truth the way you understand it. Consequently, I came to believe, this is the proclamation of the king, I came to believe that there are no objective proofs of truthness of one religion over the other. And therefore all the persecutions on basis of religious persuasion are only, how to say odef in English? Not changing, extra. They are only extra love of a person for his own religion. Right? Okay. So, here in 1492, when the Jews were expelled from Spain, this was a tremendous shock for the world Judaism. Why? Because Spain was the heart and the mind of the entire Jewish nation. So, when you cut the small finger on your left leg, it hurts, but you can survive, right? But when you get a heart problem or mind problem, that's huge for the entire body. Basically, the only thing that expulsion from Spain can be compared to is the Holocaust. For 15th century Judaism, expulsion from Spain was the Holocaust. And we can see that all the answers that as a nation and as religion and as philosophy we have given to Holocaust, we haven't made a thing which is new. All of these are patterns already invented by the Jews of Spain after the expulsion. What's one of our answers? Political Zionism, right? That's one of the answers to the Holocaust. Well, that's what they did also. Have you ever heard of Don Yosef Nassi? The guy who wanted to re-establish Jewish presence in the north of Israel, but not for old people to pray, but for young couples to work. So he established textile fabrics, how do you call them, factories, in the north of Israel. Why in the north? Because there was oral tradition that the Sanhedrin, which left Jerusalem for Yavneh, and then from Yavneh it went all the way to the north, and it had few stations in the north. The popular tradition concerning the redemption had it that the Sanhedrin will do all those stations on the way back. And here you have a guy from amongst the ex-Converso community wanting to re-establish Jewish presence in the state of Israel. Lurianic Kabbalah was actually the answer that the masses loved the most. Why? Because imagine that you are a 15th century Jew and all your world comes apart. The punishment was too big to put up with it. The usual answer: we didn't keep Shabbat well. We didn't keep Shabbat well, so you had to kill us all. I mean, come on, where are the proportions? The Jews of Spain didn't feel so much worse than all other communities in the country in order for this divine threat to be justifiable by normal means. So this was a huge question. Where was God in Auschwitz? So for them the question was, where was God in expulsion of Spain? And then you can answer, there is no God. You can answer, there is God, but he doesn't care. You can answer, there is God, he cares, and he is Christian. So Jews didn't want any of these answers, obviously. Some did. But the bulk of the people wanted a different answer. Now, what's beautiful about the Lurianic Kabbalah? Because the answer of the Lurianic Kabbalah to the posed question is the following. There is God. He cares. He's Jewish. But the thing that happened inside him. Shevirat Kelim. The vessels were broken. How could the vessels be broken within the divinity itself? Easily, they say. God is good. And he wanted to emanate good. The goodness he was emanating was so powerful that the channels of emanation dropped. So the Jewish trauma was actually projected on God. God is now undergoing the same problem as us. So he's with us. It's not that he doesn't exist. It's not that he doesn't care. It's not that he's Christian. He exists, he cares, he's ours, and we are actually helping him get out of this joint broch which we share. Right? This is broch that happened to divinity itself, to the cosmos itself. And then every single Jew doing every single mitzvah is rectifying the universe by taking the sparks of sanctity and rejoining them with their divine source. Okay, there were also bad consequences of this because Jews became deep sleepers. Basically, Luriani Kabbalah gave a beautiful answer to the question, but it also took Jews out of the history. Why? Who cared what's the name of the king if by writing the divine name with your right eye in the cost of Kiddush, you could actually change things in upper spheres? So Jews were disappointed with history. They removed themselves from history. They went to the margins and they did their own thing. Until another answer to expulsion from Spain. Messianism. Shabbatai Zevi. The first person to say Judaism is legal, like what kids play with. You can deconstruct it and reconstruct. Lego. You know those? Yeah. He's the first guy to come with the idea. No, this is beautiful. Please disagree later. But let me finish the sentence. I know you will disagree, but then you will think on it and you see I might be right. He was the first to say Judaism is legal. You can deconstruct it and reconstruct it the way you want. Now, before that, Judaism was package deal. You loved it, you took it, you didn't like it, you complained. You didn't like it very much, you kissed it and left. But it was a package deal. Now this guy comes and says, package deal? Why package deal? I can do whatever I want. I can convert Tisha B'Av into a most joyful holiday because I came already. I'm the Messiah. The redemption is here. Now, everybody disagreed with him and everybody took over the methodology. Today, basically, everybody disagrees with Shabbatai Zevi. But the Zionists, the Orthodox, the Conservative, the Reform, the Reconstructionists, the Sephardim, and the Oriental Jews, everybody treats Judaism as legal. So you pick something and you say, this is the most important thing, like the Orthodox are taking whatever, the question of separation of genders, or the question of Tzeniut, and the question of graves, including the Gentile graves. You put that on the flag, and then you can do whatever you want. So we all basically, and then I don't have to tell you what conservative do, and what Reform do, and what Sephardim do, and what Zionists do, but everybody does the same. We disagreed totally, and took over the methodology. So ever since, this is what's happening. Now, and with this I'm finishing today's presentation, there was one single group in Europe that was pissed off with the fact that the state was Catholic. These were not Jews. Why? Because Jews had their own narrative saying, we are not really here. As late as tomorrow Messiah will come, we'll go back. So this is your country, run it the way you want, just let us survive here, we will lend you some money, we will import some goods, and let us be here. It wasn't the Catholics, because for God's sake, they are Catholics, the country is Catholic, what's wrong with that? These were not Muslims because they killed all the Muslims. These were not the Protestants because the Catholics killed all the Protestants. Then Protestants returned, obviously, killing all the Catholics in their lands. So who is the group that was bothered by the fact that the state was religious? The Conversos. The Conversos were the first group in Europe to say, state should deal with imposing criminal law, preventing criminal acts, collecting money for electricity, and shut up. What I do is my personal matter. State should not interfere. Now this already starts with Rabbi Ibn Verga. You remember the conclusion of his king? Right? But this comes to the new peaks with Spinoza. Who is Spinoza? Spanish and Portuguese. Who are the Spanish and Portuguese Jews in Amsterdam? Conversos. He is solving the problem of his own community. Secular state, solution to the Converso problem. Now, if this wasn't enough, the same thing happened in Islamic world. Do me a favor, today when you get to your rooms, if you have, you do have free Wi-Fi, go to YouTube and write Ataturk Jew. Please do. And you will receive Ataturk You know the president of Turkey, Ataturk. Yeah, but Ataturk in English, but he was Turkish. So Ataturk in Turkish. So, okay, Ataturk. Ataturk, Jew. And you will get tons of Islamic and Turkish nationalist right propaganda saying that this guy was Jewish and that revolution in Turkish Empire was anti-Islamic Jewish conspiracy. Now, is this true? Well, it might be very well. I'll tell you something. Not necessarily that this was anti-Islamic conspiracy, but yes, it seems that Ataturk was Jewish. From Muslim Converso tribe called the Men. Now, let me elaborate on this one. After Shabbatai Zevi in Sephardic pronunciation was given by the Sultan. The guy proclaimed himself to be Messiah, right? 1666, he proclaims himself to be Messiah. To make a long story short, the Sultan, after letting him do his thing for some time, the Sultan touches up on his shoulder. He said, listen, I have an offer to make you. Either you become a martyr or a Muslim, which you prefer? And then Shabbatai thinks for a moment, and he says, you know what? Muslim sounds better. And he converts to Islam. Now this is, you can have Messiah convert, but that doesn't mean that Messianic Jew will stop believing he was a Messiah. So many Jews were explaining this as the ultimate act of faith, to follow the Messiah in something that looks like apostasy, but will actually bring the redemption. So, few years after Shabbatai's conversion, because of different social processes within the Jewish community, the hardcore believers were even pushed by the Jewish community to leave the fold, and they converted to Islam. Few dozen of families. And these people live in present-day Turkey. They have 20,000 followers today. They are the most secular force in Turkey. They were disproportionately represented in all the revolutions in the Turkey, always pushing for humanist, universal, secular values. Now, concerning Ataturk, there are two. First of all, he was from Salonika. Second of all, he learned in the school run by Shemsi Effendi, who is a known Denmek guy. In other words, Jews who were on outside were Muslims, but on inside they were Jewish. Messianic Jews, not regular Jews. Now, you know, everybody knows Eliezer ben Yehuda, right? Yeah. Eliezer ben Yehuda. He had a son called Itamar ben Avi. Avi meaning abbreviation of Eliezer ben Yehuda. Aleph Bet Yud, Avi. Itamar ben Avi is his son. Itamar ben Avi writes an autobiography called Beshacharit Atzma'utenu, in the dawn of our independence. And in it he says that in 1916 he met young Ottoman officer in Jerusalem under the Turkish occupation. And the officer had blue eyes and he was drinking a lot of alcohol. And he was called Kemal Mustafa. And they spoke about different things. And then Kemal Mustafa asked him, according to Itamar ben Avi's autobiography, Kemal Mustafa, the future Ataturk, asked him, what do you think of Shabbatai Zevi? And Itamar said, oh, you mean the false Messiah? And Ataturk said, you should never call him that. He's the most important man in the history of Jewish nation, and you should know the time of his descendants. Not of his followers, of his direct descendants. And then he stood up and recited Shema Israel. But then some researchers are saying Itamar ben Avi is making himself look too big in all of this, because he also said that he gave Ataturk the idea that Turks should leave the Arabic script and opt for the Latin script. So, but let's put that aside, and this is the last issue today. There is another testimony. Another testimony says, there was Ab Habayit. How do you say Ab Habayit in English? The person, Mayor, the person who runs the presidential palace. He says, in his autobiography, a Turk, Muslim. Turk. He says, Kemal Mustafa was a very authoritative person. Everybody was afraid of him. He had only 2 friends who were his childhood friends. They were also coming from the Jewish city. There is a saying, he says, Salonika, a city so Jewish that even Muslims are Jewish. Okay, so both his friends were coming from Salonika as himself. And he says those 2 guys always picked on me, telling me, oh, you stupid Anatolian peasants, you needed us, people from Salonika, to establish the state for you. So he said, I was always afraid to answer because Kemal Mustafa, Ataturk might hear me. But then he said, in one particular moment, I believed that I left him in the other part of the palace. So those 2 guys started picking my mind and told me, you needed us from Salonika to establish Turkey. And he said, nobody needed you from Salonika. Anything comes from Salonika stinks on Judaism. And then he said, I heard Ataturk coughing behind me. So I went numb, whatever is the English word? Numb. And I couldn't speak. And Ataturk said, anything coming from Salonika stinks like what? And he said, my mouth didn't help me speak. But one of his friends told him, anything coming from Salonika reminds of Judaism. And then Ataturk said, you are probably aware of the fact that people say that I'm Jewish also. But you should know that Napoleon Bonaparte started his career as the spy Italian from Corsica and ended it as the most respected Frenchman of all the times. You do not have, but what your time gives you as a framework. Now, if this is not his way of saying I am Jewish, then I'm Queen of England. Not of Scotland, necessarily. Okay, so basically we see that even in Islamic world, and certainly in Christian world, the big advocates of the idea of secularism were Jews who were forcefully removed from their own religion. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Papo. Can I just have your attention for just 1 minute? Those of you who are involved in the ensemble rehearsal that's taking place at 4:30, yes, it's still taking place at 4:30. It is in Madrid 2, and it's downstairs. It's at the street level, level 0, Madrid 2. It'll be 4:30 to 5:30. Thank you very much.